¿Quieren China, Rusia y Estados Unidos repartirse el mundo? Muchos piensan que a cambio de controlar Canadá y Groenlandia, Donald Trump estaría dispuesto a tolerar que Rusia se anexionara más territorios en el este de Europa y que China invadiera Taiwán. Así es como deben interpretarse las amenazas y acciones de Trump, aparentemente caóticas, según opinan algunos expertos. Otros, sin embargo, piensan que el objetivo de esas amenazas es otro: chantajear a los países temerosos de ser invadidos por Estados Unidos y también a los que temen perder la protección militar que ese país les brindaba hasta ahora. Europa Occidental y sus aliados asiáticos temen ser sacrificados por Donald Trump en un gran juego de poder antes de tener la fuerza necesaria para defenderse. ¿Es así como Donald Trump ve el mundo, como un inmenso negocio? Si quieres saber más, gira tu pantalla. El segundo mandato de Donald Trump es más radical que el primero. Además de desestabilizar a Estados Unidos, está cambiando el orden geopolítico establecido tras la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Trump redefine los objetivos de Estados Unidos, sus relaciones y también el lugar que su país ocupa en el mundo. Presiona a sus aliados y se acerca a quienes hasta ahora eran sus enemigos. Todo el mundo se pregunta, ¿quiénes serán los próximos? ¿Seremos nosotros? ¿Y cuál es el plan de Donald Trump? Trump puede parecer impredecible, tan impulsivo, que invita a pensar que no tiene ningún plan, ninguna estrategia. Pero quizá la explicación no sea tan fácil. De hecho, gran parte de lo que Trump hace concuerda con estrategias conocidas que podrían ayudarnos a comprender sus acciones y anticiparnos las que podrían venir después. De eso trata este video. Analizamos 3 teorías para explicar el errático comportamiento de Donald Trump. La primera es el realismo. Según esta primera teoría, Trump estaría aplicando una política internacional ya no basada en principios, sino en su forma de entender el poder. Además, Trump estaría actuando de forma opuesta a Kissinger al inspirarse en un golpe diplomático logrado por Estados Unidos durante la Guerra Fría. También hablaremos de las esferas de influencia y de cómo Trump las modifica para construir un mundo en donde las grandes potencias dominen abiertamente a los países subordinados a ellos. Cualquiera de estas estrategias podría tener implicaciones globales históricas, así que analizaremos una por una, desentrañando su lógica y buscando pruebas de que forman parte de un plan trazado por Donald Trump. Un historiador de la política exterior estadounidense analizará esas teorías con la precisión de un experto.
What are America's vital interests in the world, and what kinds of military deployments and alliance commitments should the United States make to secure those vital interests?
Expertos en Europa, Rusia y China analizarán las implicaciones de la nueva política estadounidense en regiones estratégicas para identificar tanto los riesgos como las oportunidades.
I think this disruption was necessary.
The ashes of disruption, something new can be built.
I think Taiwan has been pretty anxious.
It's very risky, dangerous, and increasingly unpredictable.
Pero antes de comenzar, queremos precisar algunas cosas. La primera, nuestro objetivo no es denostar a Donald Trump, pero tampoco lo es idealizar su política. Van a escuchar voces críticas y también voces de apoyo. La segunda precisión, aunque hay mucho en juego, también en campos como las guerras comerciales y la política interior, en este video nos centramos solo en la estrategia de Estados Unidos para el exterior. Y la tercera precisión, vamos a analizar pruebas de los primeros meses de este segundo mandato de Trump, conscientes de que las cosas irán cambiando. Nuestro objetivo es mostrar cómo esas pruebas reflejan la visión de Donald Trump. La idea es desentrañar cuál es su objetivo a largo plazo. La idea es encuadrar sus acciones en una estrategia para poder analizar las posibilidades de éxito o fracaso de esa estrategia, así como las consecuencias que puede tener todo eso para el resto del mundo. Así que vamos a empezar.
You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards.
¿Recuerdan este encuentro de Donald Trump y Volodymyr Zelensky en la Casa Blanca? Si dejamos la indignación a un lado, vemos indicios de nuestra primera teoría, indicios de que Trump es un realista.
A realist approach to the war in Ukraine would try to get the war to conclude through a compromise on both sides sooner rather than later.
Stephen Wertheim es un experto en la teoría del realismo. Así es como él define este concepto.
Realism for international relations scholars and practitioners is an orientation toward foreign policy that says that states do and should pursue their concrete national interests in a fairly hard-headed way.
De vuelta al despacho Oval, vemos a un Trump obstinado.
You're going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards.
It can be opposed to idealism, the idea that the pursuit of values should guide foreign policy or, in fact, will guide states' conduct.
Realismo frente a idealismo. El poder frente a los principios. Veámoslo por un momento en una de las apariciones de Joe Biden con Zelensky.
No nation can be truly secure in the world if, in fact, we don't stand up and defend the freedom of Ukraine from the face of this Russian brutality and aggression.
Y regresemos de nuevo con Donald Trump.
I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States.
Veamos de nuevo a Joe Biden.
We support a just and lasting peace, one that respects Ukrainian sovereignty and its territorial integrity.
Y ahora escuchemos cuáles son las prioridades de Trump.
And as you know, our country doesn't have much raw earth, so we're going to be using that, taking it, using it for all of the things we do.
Así que de Biden a Trump hay un abismo. De una retórica basada en la justicia y los principios, pasamos a juicios de ventaja y de poder. Partiendo de Ucrania, pasemos a una visión más amplia del mundo.
A realist critique would be that President Biden leaned too hard into the idea that the United States should lead a rules-based international order, that it should frame foreign policy in terms of a struggle between democracy and autocracy. President Trump portrays other countries and perhaps the international order as a whole as having been to the detriment of the United States, as having perhaps even exploited the United States over at least the past several decades.
El cambio es un shock para todo el mundo.
There is an implosion of the international rules-based order.
Gautam Chikemani es vicepresidente del ORF, el think tank más destacado de la India en materia de política exterior. Él afirma que el orden internacional ya se estaba desmoronando antes del segundo mandato de Trump.
Until yesterday, there were two orders. One was the one that did not follow the rules, which is China or to some extent Russia. America and EU were supposed to be the creators and the followers of the rules-based order. Europe looks like jokers to us. And they talk about values, but they pursue their interests.
Ahora, el escepticismo de Trump podría asestar a Europa un golpe fatal.
In his second term, it seems that he is giving up on the rules-based order and saying that if the rules are not being followed, why should America alone follow the rules?
Sabemos que esa es la idea básica de Trump y sus seguidores, que Estados Unidos debe ser lo primero.
During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first.
El America First tiene su origen en el pensamiento político estadounidense, en los aislacionistas del siglo pasado. Fueron más allá del realismo con su deseo de mantener a Estados Unidos alejado de los conflictos extranjeros. Algunos califican a Donald Trump de aislacionista, y no hay duda de que sus ideas se parecen a las de sus predecesores.
America First does lean in a realist direction. It's certainly not an idealistic cast of mind.
Muchos consideran a Trump más honesto que sus predecesores.
America First has always been America's grand strategy. He has just brought it out in the open. It's no longer covert, secret, implied. This is overt, in your face, unabashed, unapologetic.
Tampoco Joe Biden se centraba solo en defender la democracia ante la agresión a Ucrania. Él también perseguía su propia visión de los intereses estadounidenses.
There's also some criticism that one can make towards the approach that the Biden administration has pursued towards Europe and towards Ukraine in the past, which was basically not focused on ending the war in Ukraine and reaching an end state.
La alemana Liana Fix es analista de política exterior para el Consejo de Relaciones Exteriores en Washington, D.C.
based on the assumption that ending this war was not necessarily fully in the US interest and not a priority interest, because this war led to a diminishment of Russian power in Europe.
Trump comenzó su segundo mandato con un giro radical.
He sees himself in a neutral role, and his primary aim is to get into a working relationship, to a normalization of relations with Russia.
En opinión de Liana Fix, se trata de un reflejo del realismo propio de Trump.
Because let me tell you, you don't have the cards.
I would say Donald Trump is a realist businessman, but that's different than a traditional realist who see the world just through the lens of measuring nuclear power, measuring military power, measuring economic power. That's not Trump per se. That's not where his thinking comes from. He wants to reset relations because he thinks he can do deals with Russia, he can do business deals with Russia, and he doesn't care whether Russia acts as the aggressor or not.
Se trata de un giro radical, pasar de una estrategia aparentemente basada en principios, pero también centrada en debilitar a Rusia, a una estrategia que rechaza los principios por considerarlos irrelevantes y se fija como objetivo estrechar las relaciones con Rusia.
So Europe has perceived itself so far as the last island of multilateralism, of the rules-based order, which is a comfortable and cozy and warm position, fuzzy position to have, but it doesn't help you in a time when power is really defined through military power.
El impacto se ve en Alemania, en donde el nuevo gobierno tiene un plan drástico para reforzar a su ejército.
Europe is in the fundamental dilemma that it only has two choices. Either it rearms and buys enough time for this rearmament, which will not be done by tomorrow, continuing US protection during that time, or it opts for an implicit appeasement of Russia.
Es posible que la protección estadounidense no dure mucho tiempo. Veamos lo que los realistas estadounidenses piensan sobre la OTAN.
Realists have tended to be critics of NATO enlargement from the beginning of the process after the Cold War.
Ese proceso incorporó a los estados bálticos, que ahora se consideran los más expuestos a un posible ataque ruso.
I think that President Trump would probably be reluctant to fight for the Baltics if that means engaging in full-scale warfare with Russia. The United States, when it committed to, on paper, defend the Baltic states, was not thinking that that commitment might actually come due. So we should all be concerned about this problem from a structural perspective. It's not just an oddity of President Trump.
Europa se prepara por si se ve obligada a defender a los países bálticos sin el apoyo de Estados Unidos. Desde el principio, el equipo de Trump también descartó ampliar aún más la OTAN para incluir a Ucrania. Y el vicepresidente J.D. Vance vino a Alemania para dar otro duro golpe a los europeos. Vance lanzó un ataque frontal a la democracia europea y planteó la posibilidad de una verdadera ruptura entre Estados Unidos y Europa. Ahora, impulsada a actuar, la Unión Europea insta a todos sus miembros a rearmarse.
I thought Europe was going to continue to drift in its strategic slumber, but suddenly it seems to have woken up. If Europe can get together by this and take care of its own security, I think Trump would have achieved far more than he ever could on any other parameter. I think Europe was drifting, and I think this shock was necessary.
Pero otros sostienen que si el objetivo de Trump era aplicar un tratamiento de choque, se ha pasado de la raya, yendo más allá de lo que el realismo puede explicar.
This is going to be great television, I will say that.
Sometimes what President Trump pursues is maybe less tied to concrete gains or losses for the United States than how it affects the narrative of President Trump's position on the world stage. And that can take the president in maybe a non-realist direction.
I think that Trump is coming from a realist place with the caveats.
Alexander Gabweb es un experto en Rusia y China, radicado en Berlín.
It's clear that the US alliance network is what makes the US the predominant player in the global system. And this is an asset that no other peer competitor, be it China, or adversary, be it Russia, nobody can match that. And the most unrealist part of Trump's foreign policy course is the heavy blow that he has delivered to this very network of allies.
Pasemos a nuestra segunda teoría, una que sugiere un plan mucho más amplio, no centrado en los aliados de Estados Unidos, sino en sus dos mayores rivales. En febrero de 1972, el presidente estadounidense Richard Nixon aterrizaba en Pekín, iniciando una visita que cambiaría el mundo. La comitiva recorrió la ciudad, ofreciendo al equipo de Nixon una visión no solo del presidente Mao, sino también de las imágenes de Lenin y Stalin que adornaban la plaza de Tiananmen. El objetivo de aquel viaje era establecer relaciones con Mao para alejarlo de sus conexiones soviéticas. Y funcionó. Fue un golpe maestro de la diplomacia de la Guerra Fría, llevado a cabo por el legendario estratega de Nixon, Henry Kissinger. Volvamos rápidamente a octubre de 2024. Donald Trump celebraba uno de sus últimos mítines electorales junto al célebre presentador Tucker Carlson. Poco antes de terminar, Trump habló de geopolítica.
We are a nation in very serious decline, and look at what these stupid people have done. They've allowed Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and others to get together in a group. Biden united them. It's a shame. The stupidity of what they've done. I'm going to have to ununite them, and I think I can do that too. I have to ununite them.
Así, la idea de desunir a Rusia y China vuelve. Bajo el liderazgo de Vladimir Putin y Xi Jinping, Moscú y Pekín se han acercado peligrosamente. Lo más inteligente que puede hacer Estados Unidos ahora es intentar separarlos. Es una estrategia que puede recordar al golpe de Nixon y Kissinger en los años 70, pero en el mundo actual sería al revés.
There's a lot of talk of a reverse Kissinger. This time, the overture would be to Moscow to move it away from its alignment with the People's Republic of China.
Con Putin y Xi, Rusia y China están profundamente entrelazadas, tanto en lo económico como en lo diplomático y lo militar. Es una relación basada en el antagonismo de ambos líderes hacia Estados Unidos.
So a reverse Kissinger, I think, could take two different forms. First, it could be a really ambitious attempt to break the strategic partnership between Moscow and Beijing, to bring Russia over to the side of the West, or at least the United States.
Pero esta primera idea podría fracasar por varias razones.
There are limits to the historical analogy. The context is just not the same.
Amanda Xiao es directora para China y Taiwán en la consultora Eurasia Group.
Nixon was able to arrive at a rapprochement with China in the 70s and distance Beijing from Moscow because there were already problems in the Sino-Soviet relationship. And that's not the situation today. Russia is relatively dependent on China in terms of security and economically.
Neither Russia nor China want to go back into confrontation mode, and this puts limitation to how much dent you can create between Russia and China.
Entonces, ¿de qué serviría?
More modestly, a reverse Kissinger could entail giving Russia more options, making it less dependent on China for the long term, and therefore limiting what a more robust Russia-China partnership might do in the future. And I suspect that it's that latter form of thinking that is informing the current administration more than the idea of being able to peel Moscow completely away from China.
Analicemos esto. Si ese es el verdadero objetivo de la administración de Trump, su equipo deberá estar muy atento al riesgo de ser manipulado. Los rusos están preparados.
They've seen attempts to drive a wedge between Russia and China for a number of years now, including from Trump's administration. They are not very happy about their level of dependence on China, but they have much more trust in China than they have in the US.
Los anteriores intentos de Estados Unidos para acercarse a Rusia se consideran un fracaso. El más célebre es el intento de la era Obama, que incluyó incluso vínculos entre los principales diplomáticos de ambos bloques. Pero 5 años después, Rusia se apoderó de Crimea y de regiones del este de Ucrania. En 2021, Joe Biden intentó estabilizar la situación con una cumbre presidencial. Y solo 8 meses después, Vladimir Putin ordenaba a sus tropas ocupar el resto de Ucrania. Así que el riesgo de fracaso de esa estrategia es alto. Sasha Gabweb observa atentamente a Putin y a Xi Jinping y nos guía a través de las prioridades de todos los actores involucrados. En primer lugar, las prioridades de los estadounidenses.
The US needs to be very clear-eyed of what elements of China-Russia axis is it most concerned about, and what can it do about that? And probably you would rank the intelligence sharing of weapon designs, military cooperation, all of this exercises that are stepped up in terms of size and in the signaling towards the US allies, like the strategic patrols of nuclear-armed bombers.
Esa cooperación militar ha sido para Estados Unidos uno de los elementos más preocupantes de la asociación entre China y Rusia. Pero, ¿qué puede hacer el gobierno estadounidense? Alexander Gabweb detalla sus posibles próximos pasos.
Then you would try to offer Russia incentives. And you can probably say, hey, China is a towering presence in your economy, so why don't we provide incentives to gradually undo the sanctions regime and help you to restore your economic ties with the Europeans, bring back some American investment?
Pasemos a la otra parte, a Vladimir Putin. ¿Cuáles serán sus cálculos? Putin, sin duda, es consciente de que la relación de Rusia con China no es del todo igualitaria.
Longer term, the more leverage China has, the more it's likely to exploit that and to cut deals with Russia that are favoring China more than they are favoring Russia. And with that, some breathing space is something that you want to have.
El enfoque de Trump podría ofrecer precisamente eso y ser un respiro para Rusia. A cambio, Putin podría hacer a Estados Unidos algunas ofertas tentadoras. Eso sería una gran oportunidad para Putin.
You can offer an idea of partnership where Russia and the US could work together on some of the international crises that the US deems important, like be it Houthis, be it Iran. You can contribute to control over nuclear weapons, and then you can do very basic economic deals. And the obstacle to that are the US sanctions that need to be dismantled.
Eso sería una gran oportunidad para Putin.
I think that Vladimir Putin sees Donald Trump as a gift that keeps on giving. And if Trump is ready to offer carrots, you would just dangle this ability to do reverse Kissinger in front of Trump's nose. You will pocket all the carrots that are coming your way. And if your major obsession are the adversaries in the West, if that's your worldview, then the detrimental blow that Donald Trump delivers to the transatlantic unity over Russia is definitely a gift that you want to pocket. And then you see Trump as not only realist, but also very transactional, with short attention span, who is ready to break the rules, who is seeking short-term profit and seeking various deals, including commercial deals, including deals with people close to him.
Por detrás, la apuesta de Putin a largo plazo seguiría seguir siendo socio de Xi Jinping.
He will also find a way to talk to the Chinese, saying, hey, Trump is offering us these things. We are willing to entertain this opportunity because we know that Trump is there for 4 years. He is out of the picture, so we are absolutely not interested in rocking the boat of our bilateral relationship with you, China. So let's think how both of us can play Trump. And what are the symbolic concessions that we can offer to Trump that he is under the impression that, our relationship is eroding, while in reality will only fortify and solidify our bond.
Esas aparentes concesiones podrían referirse a lo que escuchamos antes.
So, for example, why don't we cancel this symbolic flights of nuclear-armed bombers, right? They don't bring that much to the table, frankly. We will cancel that, we'll make a big fuss, and then Trump will think that his policy is working. Why don't we kind of reduce the scale of the mutual military exercise for the next 4 years, while at the same time we will fortify the economic conditions?
Pero hay al menos un ámbito en el que Estados Unidos y Rusia sí podrían cooperar para lograr algo significativo.
I do think President Trump is genuinely concerned about the possibility of nuclear war. It's a frequent topic that he returns to.
El último tratado que regula las armas nucleares de Estados Unidos y Rusia expira en 2026. Fue el resultado más positivo del tratado New START, impulsado por Obama en 2010. Renovarlo aportaría beneficios a ambas partes.
I think that the Russians are interested. The Russians will be happily going into that direction because they are embarking on a costly military modernization. They want to expand their conventional military, compensate for losses of equipment in Ukraine. So if there is a way to avoid a nuclear arms race with the US, the Russians will be happily doing that. The question is that Trump really wants to bring China into this conversation, and the Russians understand that China is absolutely not interested before it reaches the same level of of nuclear deterrent as the Americans and the Russians.
Así que la cuestión de las armas nucleares también tiene una importante dimensión china. Veamos ahora qué cálculos haría China si viera que Rusia y Estados Unidos empiezan a llevarse bien. ¿Es esa una de las preocupaciones de Xi Jinping?
Likely there is some uncertainty and sensitivity and anticipation of a shift in dynamic between Beijing and Moscow as a result of improvements in the US-Russian relationship. Putin will have more leverage in its dealings with Beijing in a scenario where sanctions on Russia are lifted.
Pero para Xi, eso no cambia la principal estrategia de China a largo plazo.
Its alignment with Russia is strategic and not tactical. And as long as that condition holds, that competition with the US will continue, and that Beijing views Washington as its primary and long-term adversary.
Hemos repasado los peligros para Estados Unidos incluso en torno a esta idea de hacer lo contrario que Kissinger, alejar a Rusia de China. Lograrlo aportaría ventajas potenciales y hay indicios de que la administración de Trump quiere intentarlo. Para algunos, mejorar las relaciones entre Estados Unidos y Rusia sería algo positivo. Es el caso de la India, que tiene fuertes lazos tanto con Washington como con Moscú.
It would be wonderful if US and Russia get together, because India and Russia are already there together. I think the days of binaries are over. I think if Russia and America do get closer, it doesn't mean it will be at the cost of Russia and China. If India and America get closer, it will not be at the cost of India and Russia.
Pero en Europa, un acercamiento significativo de Estados Unidos a Rusia agravaría el impacto en el sistema que mencionamos en la primera parte. Esa perspectiva alimenta la idea de que Europa podría querer estabilizar sus relaciones con China para asegurar sus apuestas geopolíticas. Sin duda, eso supondría una oportunidad para Pekín, que lleva mucho tiempo aspirando a dar su propio golpe geopolítico, separar a Europa de Estados Unidos.
China sees both challenges and opportunities in the geopolitical shifts that are occurring right now. And so I think from the Chinese perspective, even if there is some anxiety about the China-Russian relationship, they see potential for gain in the European one.
Pero muchos alertan a los europeos, señalando los riesgos de dar ese paso.
I think that would be a naive illusion from Europeans. China is both an economic and a security threat to Europeans.
El hecho de que haya estos debates muestra el grado de perturbación global que podría provocar incluso ese modesto intento de revertir la estrategia de Kissinger. No obstante, Trump y su administración podrían pensar que vale la pena.
We do have a team of national security advisors around him who know that there is a danger in an axis of upheaval, as it is called, in closer relations between Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea that is detrimental to U.S. interest.
There's the possibility that in the future, if the partnership among these four countries gets closer, they could launch attacks that are coordinated.
Esa es la pesadilla de Estados Unidos y una de las razones principales por las que su gobierno quiere que Europa asuma más responsabilidades en materia de seguridad.
The fear that the US might be overstretched in a two-front war in Europe and the Indo-Pacific is a real and a legitimate fear that US defense planners have and something that Europeans have to take into account.
El expresidente Joe Biden optó por hacer frente a la amenaza estrechando los vínculos con sus aliados. Trump parece apostar por lo contrario, por acercarse a Rusia para intentar restar fuerza a la amenaza. Pero hay otra posibilidad, que Trump dé un paso más para poder desactivar esa amenaza por completo. Esta es la tercera teoría de este video, y quizá la más inquietante de todas. En enero de 2025, otro avión presidencial aterrizaba en tierra extranjera. A este avión lo llaman Trump Force One. Era una nave no oficial para un viaje no oficial realizado antes de la toma de posesión del nuevo presidente. De hecho, a bordo no había ningún presidente. En su lugar llegaba Donald Trump Jr. con un mensaje de su padre.
He says hello. We were talking to him yesterday, so he says hello to everyone in Greenland.
2 meses después, Trump padre había asumido el cargo y pronunciaba su primer discurso ante el Congreso. Y habló de Groenlandia con más claridad que antes.
And I also have a message tonight for the incredible people of Greenland. We strongly support your right to determine your own future. And if you choose, we welcome you into the United States of America.
Lo que al principio pudo parecer una invitación amistosa o incluso algo cómico, daba luego un giro inesperado.
We need Greenland for national security and even international security, and we're working with everybody involved to try and get it. But we need it really for international world security, and I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it.
Fue algo extraordinario. Un presidente de los Estados Unidos hablaba de hacerse con un enorme territorio extranjero, de una forma u otra. Poco después, el vicepresidente J.D. Vance visitaba la base estadounidense en Groenlandia y difundía un video, según el cual la toma de Groenlandia por Estados Unidos sería inevitable.
This is not just history, it is destiny. Now is the time to stand together again. For peace, for security, for the future. America stands with Greenland.
Trump ha ejercido una presión similar sobre Canadá.
If you look at Canada, it would be cherished as a 51st state. They don't pay their share of military in NATO. They pay very little for military. They're not protected at all. And the reason is they think we're going to protect them. Without the U.S., Canada really doesn't have a country.
También ha puesto sus ojos en el Canal de Panamá, una ruta comercial crucial.
The Panama Canal was built by Americans for Americans, not for others. But others could use it. We gave it to Panama and we're taking it back.
Trump pretende ampliar la zona que se encuentra bajo el control de Estados Unidos. Se trata de una idea con una tradición muy larga, la idea de que los países poderosos deben tener una esfera de influencia.
Spheres of influence are associated with great power relations and empire from the 19th century into the 20th century. One idea of spheres of influence is that almost inevitably major powers exert predominant political influence among weaker neighbors. There's no question that President Trump is employing spheres of influence thinking when he threatens to annex the Panama Canal, Greenland, or Canada.
We will be a rich nation again. The United States will once again consider itself a growing nation, one that increases our wealth, expands our territory, builds our cities, raises our expectations, and carries our flag into new and beautiful horizons. And we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars.
President Trump explicitly referred to America's 19th century tradition of manifest destiny.
Según esa idea, los colonos europeos habían sido elegidos por Dios para expandirse hacia el oeste a través del norte de América.
That goes back to the U.S. Monroe Doctrine of 1823, in which the United States claimed a sphere of influence over the Western Hemisphere. So the United States has claimed a sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere for much of its history, and President Trump makes us all confront that fact.
Lo mismo que su lema America First, vemos que gran parte del pensamiento de Trump no es nuevo. Pero volvamos ahora a lo que dice sobre Groenlandia, Canadá y Panamá.
Whether he's serious about the threats, is a question everybody is asking, but the very fact that he's making them, and generally not making annexationist threats outside the Western Hemisphere, with the very notable exception of Gaza, suggests that Trump recognizes the difference between U.S. interests in the Western Hemisphere and perhaps its more limited interests overseas.
Para algunos, eso equivale al mismo expansionismo imperialista del siglo XXI, propio de Vladimir Putin o Xi Jinping. Putin se ha anexionado ilegalmente numerosas regiones de Ucrania y ha amenazado con mucho más. Y Xi no solo reclama el control sobre Taiwán, sino también sobre extensas zonas de la India. Con Trump, todo es aún más impredecible.
With Trump, it's difficult to say he is he's an outright imperialist as Putin is, or as Xi Jinping has ambitions to be, because it's not necessarily a theory of imperialism that is driving that, but he sees Canada and Greenland as assets. I mean, this is a good asset that is in your neighborhood and that you should own, right? Across your street, you have a beautiful house. Well, why don't you try to buy it? And that's something that in Trump's history and business history, we've seen very often. He has tried to pitch to buy property that was not for sale. The crucial element here is the idea of deal making and the idea, well, if I want to get something and I can either get it through pressure or through incentives, I will do it, even if that breaks every rule in international relations and every relationship the United States has with its allies.
Efectivamente, la actitud de Trump hacia su esfera de influencia pone en peligro las relaciones y la reputación de Estados Unidos mucho más allá del hemisferio occidental. El resto del mundo está muy atento a sus movimientos.
At this moment, today, to me, Xi Jinping and Donald Trump are the same. This bullying, I think, Trump has become Xi Jinping. So when the world sees that the two great powers of today, China and United States, are the same, they are not respecting rules-based order, they are pushing countries, for instance, Greenland may be taken over, or Canada, he wants it to be the 51st state, and so on. When the rules-based order is out, then what is the difference between China and the US?
Eso nos lleva al núcleo de esta idea de las esferas de influencia y su potencial desestabilizador, porque como acabamos de escuchar, Donald Trump no sería su único abanderado. Esa es la visión del mundo de Vladimir Putin y Xi Jinping. Pensemos en ello por un momento.
Vladimir Putin has chosen to be obsessed with dominance over former Soviet periphery, particularly Belarus and Ukraine, that he views as part of the broader Russian nation.
I think China would welcome a carving up of the world into spheres of influence.
Trump, por su parte, ha mostrado poco interés en cuestionar las reivindicaciones de Rusia y China sobre sus esferas de influencia.
He doesn't understand why maintaining a sovereign, independent, prosperous Ukraine is in U.S. interest, and why the U.S. should throw blood and treasure on countering this revanchist imperialist agenda of Russia.
Trump himself has always shown relatively little interest in Taiwan. For Trump, Taiwan is really a chip to play in the larger U.S.-China relationship.
He is trying to move away semiconductor production to the United States to make the United States less dependent on Taiwan.
Hemos llegado a la pregunta clave. Si Trump quiere una esfera de influencia y no le importa que Rusia y China tengan la suya propia, ¿estamos ante el acuerdo del siglo?
So an extreme version of what we could see if President Trump thoroughly applies spheres of influence thinking would be that the United States, China, and Russia explicitly or tacitly agree that they will have spheres of influence, that the United States would pull back from the spheres of influence that Russia and China claim. And so you would have, in this rather extreme scenario, a basis for considerable cooperation, or at least alignment, among the three major powers.
Eso podría resultar atractivo para Trump, pero ¿qué significaría para todos los demás? Eso inquieta especialmente a los puntos más conflictivos y disputados por las grandes potencias. Probablemente significaría el fin de la independencia de Ucrania y acercaría la amenaza rusa a Europa occidental. Taiwán perdería rápidamente su autonomía y China daría un paso significativo hacia el dominio de Asia.
In its view, a key reason for why neighbors like Japan, Korea, the Philippines, and India are pushing back in their maritime and land disputes at China is because of the U.S.'s backing and the U.S.'s encouragement. So in the Chinese view, if the U.S. retreats, these governments are more likely to adopt postures that are more accommodating.
Las potencias asiáticas se verían obligadas a responder.
The world is populated by middle powers and ascending middle powers like India that absolutely will not accept Chinese sphere of influence in northern Himalayas, particularly in the territories that India claims are Indian, or Chinese dominance in South Asia. Whatever Trump might agree to, these countries see themselves as poles in this multipolar order in their own right, and will deny other parties the sphere of influence.
So if it comes to India, I hope he doesn't break the trust, but if he does, India will survive. So we can take care of our defense, we can take care of our borders, we can take care of our seas, we can protect our trade.
Desde Asia hasta Europa y el resto del mundo, ¿desaparecería realmente el riesgo de conflictos?
This is a very dangerous world because if the agreement is, we have this overlapping sphere of influence, and then the big parties can dictate the terms and the smaller countries have just to accept their fate, that opens the Pandora box for various type of regional conflicts between countries big and small.
Es solo una muestra de lo que podría suponer este escenario extremo. Si Trump optara por eso, se vería obligado a superar una fuerte oposición interna.
For him to, take dramatic actions to cede spheres of influence to Russia in Europe or to China in East Asia, I think would run into a huge amount of resistance in his own bureaucracy, in Congress, in the media. It would be a very difficult undertaking.
También es posible que el propio Trump no quiera llegar tan lejos.
hundreds of billions of dollars to support.
Los miembros del equipo de Trump han mencionado la necesidad de desviar recursos militares desde Europa hacia la región del Indo-Pacífico, sugiriendo que Trump sí desea mantener su presencia en Asia, que es crucial para el comercio mundial. Pero también hay indicios de que Estados Unidos exigirá a sus aliados asiáticos que hagan mucho más para garantizar su propia defensa. Eso dejaría abiertas todas las opciones para que Trump intente llegar a algún tipo de acuerdo con China.
There's a more modest view of spheres of influence that might be more realistic and would have some upsides. Over Taiwan, President Trump could exchange public assurances with Xi Jinping to reaffirm the One China policy, maybe even go a little bit further to suggest that the United States doesn't want to see Taiwan become independent, that the United States would accept any peaceful resolution of cross-strait differences that would be reached without coercion.
Some indicators of this would be fewer arms sales to Taiwan, less public expressions of concern of Chinese coercion towards Taiwan.
Taiwán se apresura a reforzar su precaria posición con promesas de que gastará más en su propia defensa. Además, su gigante productor de chips TSMC ha llegado a un acuerdo sobre las plantas de fabricación conocidas como fabs para intentar ganarse el favor de Trump.
So Taiwan has has been pretty anxious and has been feeling relatively uncertain about the direction of Trump's policy. We saw that TSMC made a major announcement of an investment of $100 billion in the U.S. and plans to build more fabs in Arizona. So I think Taiwan is doing its best that it can to play the cards that it has, and we will see how the Trump administration responds.
Ese es el temor que se extiende tanto en Asia como en Europa ante las acciones de Estados Unidos, Rusia y China. Temen ser sacrificados en un gran juego de poder antes de haber acumulado la fuerza necesaria para defenderse.
For the first time, the European and the Indo-Pacific theater, or just in general, the global dimension of conflicts in Europe and the Indo-Pacific is so interlinked. And now we see, through Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that the patterns are so similar and the concerns are so similar about what if he abandons Ukraine, will he abandon Taiwan, that all Indo-Pacific partners are watching very closely what's happening in Europe and vice versa. So the US allies in both theaters are actually on the same side now, concerned about what does it mean if the United States, which has purposefully built these alliance relationship, now suddenly leaves its allies out in the cold.
Hemos analizado tres estrategias que podrían explicar las acciones de Trump: el realismo, anteponer el poder a los principios; un Kissinger al revés, el intento de alejar a Rusia de China; y las esferas de influencia, un reparto del planeta entre tres potencias. Hemos visto que hay indicios de que esas teorías tienen fundamento. ¿Pero está Trump preparado para apostar por alguna de ellas? Hay dos rasgos de su personalidad que podrían hacerle fracasar. Su tendencia al acoso podría nublar su realismo y su impulso desestabilizador podría imponerse a su capacidad de ejecución.
Trump has become Xi Jinping.
Si esa opinión se generaliza, el resultado podría ser el contrario al esperado.
If the two are the same, if the both are bullies, if both are pushing the boundaries of negotiation or rules in which they function, or both are untrustworthy, simply speaking, then out of the total of 193 countries, 120 have China as their biggest trading partner. If you were to realign yourself, you would naturally move to China.
Entre las consecuencias no deseadas, una de las más importantes sería que más de 100 países se acercarían a China. Lo más grave sería que uno de esos países fuera la India.
India would like to continue to work with the US, but if the US is going to become a China, then it's far better to engage with China and imagine a world where India and China are one market. Such kind of logic, it's not there in the government right now. I haven't heard about it yet. But imagine such a world. You created the EU. Now look at India and China together. So I think these are the new options that will be on the table.
Esa es la cuestión. Todos los países pondrán sobre la mesa opciones que quizá antes no habían considerado. Y eso nos lleva al segundo riesgo para Trump, su profundo impulso desestabilizador.
I think Trump's his unpredictability, which he has achieved as he's wanted to, may prevent him from achieving any one of the very coherent scenarios that we've been discussing. He is happy to zig and zag, and often it seems as though tactical considerations, performative considerations are at the fore for him rather than a particular destination.
All three approaches might be true at the same time. Two of them might be true on Monday, and then the other two might be on Tuesday, and then there is another combination on Wednesday. Whatever it is, it's very risky, dangerous, and increasingly unpredictable.
Es como tirar los dados. Puede ir en contra de la propia estrategia, pero también ofrece oportunidades para quien sabe aprovecharlas.
In the totality of things, which takes domestic disruption as well as international disruption into account, I'm positively inclined. I think this disruption was necessary. The fake liberalism had to be called out. The extreme wokeism had to be called out. Europe had to be woken up. And the world at large, including India, had to be shaken into not being lulled into a strategic sleep. And I think Trump has done all of that. My only apprehension is that is he trustworthy? And at this moment, I don't know.
The ashes of disruption, something new can be built. So for Europe, that means that for the first time they actually have a real pressure to build up their own security and defense.
Ya podemos hacernos una idea de las estrategias que Trump podría estar siguiendo, de sus objetivos y también de los escollos que pueden aparecer en su camino. Además, nos hemos hecho una idea de cómo podría responderle el resto del mundo. Son formas de medir el impacto de Donald Trump, pero lo cierto es que ni él ni nadie puede controlar el resultado de sus acciones. Existe todo un universo de posibilidades impredecibles.